Okay, good afternoon. Today is October 27th. We are discussing European culture. Last Monday, we have been looking at gaps between Japanese and European culture, and to identify, okay, where are the differences, where are the gaps that we need to overcome in order to build up relationships between Japan and Europe. The objective of that is actually to maintain contact with the global economy, the world, because I believe there is a risk that Japan will become isolated in the world. So looking at the gaps based on what we have discussed so far, history, philosophy, I try to make a summary of the biggest differences between Japan and Europe. So looking at history, one very obvious big gap, big difference between Japan and Europe was that Europe is a continent with different countries, with different peoples, and throughout history these peoples have been different languages, different cultural backgrounds actually, and these people have been moving throughout Europe, and they formed nations, they formed tribes, they were at conflict, they made peace, but there was this constant struggle and battling and constant change. That was actually a common denominator. Now this conflict, the negotiation that went on, that shaped Europe. That shaped Europe as it is today. First of all, military might, military power was crucial in Europe in order to sustain your group, in order to such an unstable environment. So that meant that there was a lot of attention towards military strength, and that actually had been used in the development and the colonialization of the world from Europe. That was also supported by their military power. On the other hand, we have Japan, which is an island of stability, which has lived in 400-year isolation, and even before that, another sign of stability was the imperial family, the longest reigning imperial family in the world, which basically Japan has been a country which is not a melting pot, which has not been constantly on the move, but basically has tribes with people with similar backgrounds, similar language, similar cultural understanding. So that is a very crucial difference. The first gap between Japan and Europe. Then we looked at, Confucianism. The role of Confucianism in Japan is important. Confucianism is kind of a way how you should live if you want to become a gentleman. And a gentleman is basically is a person of strong character, of integrity, that is a person who gets followers so he can become a leader. And basically there is a way where you start from with yourself, to cultivate yourself, to manage your family, and to basically grow that out and become somebody who will attract followers, who can lead a country. But there are certain steps and how to achieve that, how you should live your life, what you should do on a day-to-day basis in order to achieve this goal. That kind of compares to Christianity. I think there are, it's safe to say that Christianity is also kind of a roadmap, things that you need to do. You need to pray every day, you need to go to church, you cannot do this, you cannot, like the Ten Commandments are also clear roadmaps as to how you should live your life. That is something that exists next to philosophy, and that's the third point. Basically, what we see, and that's the second point is more or less a thing that they have in common. On the third point, I think is a big gap between Japan and Europe. Western philosophy is very much based on logic, argumentation, and modeling. We are very after the Greeks started a big movement in philosophy. The idea behind this philosophy is that we have to be very critical into analyzing the world around us, and to really get to the core, the essence of things. And we use logic in order to put everything together. So this model of this way of thinking, the way that we try to create models of reality and apply logic in order to create a relation between cause and effect, that is a way of thinking that has become the way of thinking in Europe. This is the way that we are being taught from the moment we are born until we die. We believe that this is the way people should think. So abstractions, cause and effect, argumentation in order to find the truth. Argumentation is not used as a way to build a conflict, but ideally speaking, argumentation is a way to find the truth, to get closer to the truth. On the other hand, we see Japan, where there is less focus on logics and less tendency towards models. There is more of a so-called holistic approach. The holistic approach is taking the reality as it is and accepts the complexities of this reality, and accepts the fact that you can look at reality from different angles and then have different viewpoints. So there is not a single truth. There in Western logic, there is it's kind of like a two-dimensional space, versus in Japan there's a three-dimensional space. The two-dimensional way of logic, there you can quickly reach a conclusion, say, okay, if this then that, and you say, okay, it's true, either true or false. But if you look at it something holistic, you take the third dimension into consideration. That means that sometimes you need to go back and forth, not only in the two-dimensional space, but also in the three-dimensional space. That sometimes means that you need to revisit points that you have already looked at, but then you look at a third dimension, so you look at it from a different perspective. Now, this way of thinking is completely foreign to Europeans. At least to most Europeans, and actually I was not aware of it, and I became aware of it when I came to Japan, and somebody told me that you're right, but yet you're wrong. So that was the first time that I thought, that is so unlogical. You're right, yet you're wrong. How can you be right and wrong at the same time? Well, basically, then I started to realize that there are such things as parallel truths, that based on the third dimension, the way that you look at things, you can be right or wrong. And I never actually even considered the third dimension. So for many Europeans, when they are engaging with Japanese and vice versa, there is this very uncomfortable space when you're trying to understand each other. Because from the Western perspective, it seems like when we are discussing things, when we're trying to clarify things, that we are not really addressing the issue, because we don't argue in Japan. We are not really coming to conclusions, because we are not making progress into the clearly defined and specified agenda, where we need to just decide upon these 10 points, and then we can conclude and we can decide how to go forward. Whereas in Japan, we need to revisit the same problem when we're looking at it from a different perspective. So it feels very uncomfortable for Westerners that they feel that we are not making any progress. Then we are introducing logics based on our models that are not really well understood nor well received, because in Japan we do not believe only in the models as to be the truth. The model is just a simplification of the truth, whereas we put the model as a replacement of that truth. So this is actually a very big gap one of the biggest gaps, I believe, in between Western and Japanese